Hi, everybody. It's Nancy Reyes with For Your K9.
And Joanne Stoike with For Better For Worse.
And of course, Fido's joining us for his usual cameo appearance this week. So today we're going to talk about, let us know you're there. And today we're going to talk about how to get the most of your training. And actually, this was actually brought to our attention, mentioning somebody had, a student had mentioned it to us. And so I thought this would be a really good topic to address and talk about. Hey, Mel. Hi, Judy. Anyway, so basically, a lot of people, and those of you who train dogs, or whether you volunteer, you're getting paid professionally, you get people that come in and they're like, oh, in 6 weeks my dog will be trained. Well, yeah, it's not. It doesn't work like that. But for whatever reason, that does seem to be a. Hey, Jonette. That does seem to be I don't know, a myth, or people think about that, right? That, oh, you should be able to take your dog to one class and you should be able to, the dog will be trained and they'll know all this stuff. So it's interesting as to why that is and why that is, because we don't learn things like that quickly. We can't take a class and learn everything we need to know about whatever it is. It takes time. But in dog training, it doesn't seem to, that's not how people look at it. They look at dog training as you take a class and they're trained, or you take 2 or 3 classes and they're trained. And I'm talking about pet dogs. We will address the competition dogs later, but that seems, because I get it all the time. Oh, so what can you guarantee my dog learning in 6 weeks or 8 weeks? And people get very upset when the dog doesn't learn everything that they should know and be done in 6 weeks or whatever it is. And so that's one of the things that I thought, that's a really great topic, because I wonder why that is. You're driving home from the Minnesota. Hey, Ronnie. Yep, it's the thing. Aaron says that because people are impatient and want fast results. Well, and that's true. And in the world we live in, with instant gratification, right? We want people don't want to wait and have to work at it. The dog should just know it, which is why you get so many 6 to 18-month-old young dogs, turned into the shelter, because that's when they're most annoying. So anyway, so that's why we wanted to kind of address that a little bit. And yeah, and Aaron, that's true. It's because people are impatient, and that doesn't matter whether you're a trainer where people pay to come to your facility, or volunteer at a dog club. It's the same. Everybody gets the same situation. Like the people want the dog to be trained in a very short time, and unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. So yes, people are impatient. I don't know. What are some of the other reasons that you can think of that maybe people don't want to take time to, and we see it in performance people too, right? They want the dog to hurry up and learn it, but it's no different than somebody saying, Nancy, I want you to learn accounting right now, like in one class. Well, anybody who knows me knows that will never happen. That is not a possibility. It's going to take me lots of classes to learn that.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things too, right? Like, I have tried to take guitar lessons. I can't tell you how many times. Right, your 6-week class, your 4-week class. I'm not good at it. I wish I was good at it, but I can't wish talent. Right? I can play other instruments. I suck at guitar, and so I think too, though, right? Like, in college, I took I think it was like a 10-week class. I got okay with it, and then guess what? I didn't do it for a year. I don't remember anything I learned. Maybe a little, not much, right? And you think about too, like, did you take a foreign language in high school? How much did you really retain? And that was a whole semester.
Right. And Lori Monarzik makes a really good point, because it's true. It's like in the first session or first 6 weeks, you're teaching how to train the dog to the to the person. The person's learning how the dogs learn. And then the second, and if you take another session, then you can really start the dog's learning, because you understand, you're understanding how the dogs learn and all that, the whole process, right? Yeah.
And I can't see comments tonight, guys, because I'm driving, so forgive me. But I think too, like, one of the bigger things with people that you hear from a lot of teachers of, school age children, which is like, it's not just my job to teach your dog, right? You have to work with them at home. You have to help them to understand it, right? They only get a certain amount of time with me, in class every day, and then we switch a subject and we switch a subject. So, you can tell the difference in students where parents aren't spending the time helping their kids to understand homework. It shows up very, very quickly. And it's funny for, dog trainers, I know Nancy and I have this conversation sometimes too, right? It's like, you can tell me what you want to tell me, but don't forget your dog is talking to me louder than what you're saying, right? So
Christy Murdoch put, el perro es en la casa de Eugenio. That's how she remembers from Spanish class.
Something about my dog in the house and something. I don't even remember.
The dog is the dog is in Eugene's home. That's
nice.
That's awesome. Well, but so that is true, and working the dogs, and that's one of the things we really need to. And I think, and I'll be honest, I think I am remiss a little bit on this too. It's like we have to explain to people, and it's really hard because people don't want to think their dog is dumb. But some dogs don't learn as fast as others, and it also depends on what you're teaching them, right? Some dogs will pick up a concept really quickly and get it, and then might struggle with another concept, just like us, right? We might struggle with one subject and be really good at another one. So, and I think people don't understand that about their dog, right? So it's really a very interesting, and I wonder why that is, because dogs do learn so much from us. They're so much more aware of what we do, and they're learning all the time, whether we're teaching them or not. But that still means that you need to train, you need to work at home. And that's, Donna remembers, no habla español. That's great.
Un poco.
Well, that's one thing I'm really good at. So I can help you guys learn Spanish. That's easy. For me. But anyway, so yeah, it's one of those things. And for the dogs, depending on what you practice on. So I always tell people, when you go to a class, puppy or basic, really think about how you want your dog to live in your house. It really then makes it easier to then decide what things, because as trainers, we teach you all these things: a sit, a down, a come, standing, all these little different things. We teach them those things. But you're not going to use all of those things. You might use some depending on how it works for your house and your family. So that's why one of the things I want you to, I always tell them, think about how you want your dog. What are some of the things that are okay and what are not okay? And then you're going to take that with you. Then you're going to practice those things more than you would practice, something else, right? Or like I don't know, let's say, give an example, like a stand. I don't have a conformation dog. I do teach my dogs to stand briefly, but I'm not going to work on that as much as I'm going to work on a stay or a recall, right? Because those are more important to me. I will work on those other ones, but so it's kind of picking and choosing how you want to, how you want your dog to live with you, right? So.
Yep, and I think too, Nancy sort of hit it earlier on, which is, not all dogs learn the same way, right? Same as not all handlers teach the same way. I am not one of those drills people. Like, I like to mix it up. If we're working on a couple of skills, I'll kind of do one maybe 3 times. I'll do another one. I'll switch to this one. I'll switch to that one. Once they sort of know it, right? Just to keep it interesting for the dog. But I also have a dog, 2 of them actually, they get bored very quickly. Right? So if I'm trying to drill in a new trick that I'm teaching, and by the 20th time I've done it, The other two dogs are like, this is not fun anymore. Where the Vizsla's like, I love you, whatever you want. I'll keep working on it. You know, so it's a lot easier to teach him, like trick stuff where it takes some longevity and some focus. Where the other ones, it's like, I remember trying to teach Bam how to shake, and it was like, oh my God, we were stuck on the phase of like, I just lifted my paw up forever because he's like, I don't get it. It's like, oh. And finally, when he got it, now he's like, oh, this. I'm like, yes, this. Great, got it. But it took a long time to get to the aha moment. And sometimes we get frustrated. And clearly there was something I was doing he was not understanding, right? So trying to shift for the dog, if they're not getting it, you have to try a different way.
Right. Right. And Lynn made a good point. She says, it's like people want a pill or a potion that would help them lose weight. And that is a true statement. That's why that industry is a billion and billions of dollars that people spend money on losing weight. And really, a lot of those gimmicks, if you will, are there to help you get started, but you still have to do the work. And anything that's worthwhile is going to take time. Right. So losing weight is one of those since I've been on that journey the last almost year. Well, 10 months or whatever. No, 9 months. It's been a journey, and it's hard, and it's a struggle and all those things. But it's not easy, and it's work. You gotta put effort in to make it happen. So just like training a dog, you have to put the effort in to get the results you want. And sometimes you put the time in, but you were like, oh wow, I have that part. Or they teach you so much because it's like, okay, they're not getting it this way, like Joanne said. What's another way I can get them to understand that same thing, right? Or why aren't they understanding this? Because normally, and so let me go back to in behavior. Anything you see 3 times is already going to be a habit. So whether it's good or bad, it's something about that behavior for them is a thing, right? It's something about that they learned it for whatever reason. Whether you meant to teach it that way to them or not, it is what it is. That's what they picked up. So then stop that. Stop if you don't like the behavior and figure out how to help them come up with a better option for you and for the dog. Because sometimes it's not so straightforward. And that's why all dog trainers aren't created equal, right? You always have to find one that's going to be, okay, if you can't figure out this, then how about this, right? And come up with different ways to teach it, right? But I do get a lot of people that, I tried everything. Well, how long did you try it? How much time did you put into it? And invariably, it's like not a lot of time, not a lot of effort, right?
And what's everything? The 2 or 3 things that I might know how to do, right? Like,
right.
I said sit, and then I said sit louder, and then I pushed his butt down, and I don't know why he doesn't get it.
Right. So yeah, it's one of those things. It takes a little effort. It takes a little effort to be able for the dog to, and you got to figure out how your dog, what's the best way for them to learn. Some dogs are more visual learners. Some dogs are not. It's one of those things you have to figure it out. And figure out how they learn, what's the best way to do it. Right. Hold on one second. So anyway, and some dogs are more visual and also drilling. That's what we tend to do. Doing it more and doing it more and doing it more, the dog will learn it. No, just like Joanne said, one of her dogs is really great at, like, hey, I can do it all day if you want. And the other ones are like, yeah, I'm kind of over it now. I'm done. Don't want to do that anymore. Right. Yeah, and Deb says it right. It's relationship building. But Deb, that word is so overused in training. It's ridiculous. What does it really mean? It's no different than what the relationship means for human relationships, right? It's it's like
Right.
what
If you were
what is
trying to build a relationship with your kid or your niece or your nephew, right, and you're going to sit down and play a game of Legos, right? You're not going to be like, okay, now build this, now put this here, now do that, now do this, right? And pretty soon the kid's like, this is not fun. I don't like to play Legos with you.
right, right.
You know, when it
And
stops being a game and it starts being work.
right. And so I'm gonna touch base and Christy, that's a really good point, right? It can be discouraging when the dog isn't picking up, or you have a training session where the dog really hasn't really got it or understand it or anything like that. So, but sometimes like Joanne says, they might have that aha moment, and be like, oh, there it is, and you'll be so happy when they get it. But you have to have like time and patience, and you have to put that time in. And for those of you who are pet owners, it's really important that when you get a dog, one class isn't going to do it. You have to commit to really spending the time, and depending, especially if you have a rescue, that can get really challenging, right? Because you don't know what the background is. You might have other things that you might have to deal with that that you may not have to with a brand new puppy, right? And sometimes with the new puppies of your, when you get a new puppy, we try to do the right thing, and sometimes we over worry or over helicopter mom it or whatever you want to call it, right? So you can create some problems. But the important thing is, and everybody's going to make mistakes with their dogs. Not everybody does it perfect. And sometimes the big thing is to notice when you see the behavior, then you're going to make sure you go back in there and, address it so it doesn't get any worse, right? You're like, oh, how did my dog make that connection? Somehow in our training, that's what she figured out, which is not what I intended. So those are things you want to be, you always want to spot check. Did you understand me? Is this what you understood from me? Okay, let's go on to the next thing and make it more challenging and add on to the dog's repertoire, but make sure they have it pretty solid. So.
Yes, and remember, the easiest thing for you at that moment might not have the result of what you want to teach your dog, right? What were we talking about today, Nancy? The door slam, throwing yourself against the door.
Yes.
So it was just right. The dog, when the dog wanted to go outside, the dog kept throwing himself against the door, and how do we stop it? Well, what do you do when the dog throws himself against the door? Well, we open the door. We don't want him to throw himself against the door, right? So that's working for him really well.
Right, because sometimes we inadvertently, yes, it was a client I had many, 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 many years ago when I first opened. He said the dog that he would sit in the back porch, all season porch, look out the window, throwing himself at the window, and just bark his head off and be crazy and all that at squirrels. And I said, so what do you do when he does that? Oh, they let him outside. So that very behavior that you want to stop is being heavily reinforced by allowing the dog to open the door, let the dog out to chase whatever he wanted. And it's like, that's why sometimes we have to think about our behavior and how that's affecting what we're teaching, or what we may be teaching the dogs, which is maybe not what we wanted. We might our intent might be different, but what we're teaching them is something else, right? And Terry made it. Yes, as a trainer, her favorite response from an owner is, my dog flunked class. Dogs don't flunk classes, just like some children. Well, some kids flunk class, but just like some kids are moving. They move a little faster than they understand things a little faster and concepts a little faster than others. And so that's what makes it very challenging. And I know there's been some different class setups. Like our classes are very traditional in that they're 6 weeks long and you progress through them. There are other classes that are progressive, which means you can join anytime. And that seems to work for some folks, but I found it very difficult to, which is kind of nice because you have new people and you have also people that are more experienced working in the same space, and that works really well I know it works really well for competitive obedience, but I don't know how that will work for puppy and basic. But they do have progressive classes for those as well. Some trainers do, and I don't know if some of you are out there that do that. But we haven't. We I tried to incorporate it at one time and it didn't work so well. So uh yes, Sage Canine. I'm not sure who that is. Besides choosing a dog that hopefully has genes that allows a dog to learn and be trained, other ways before buying and adopting a dog to test their yes, yes. Actually, there is several assessments out there that you can do on your puppy that will see how biddable that dog is. Which is thank you for bringing that up because that is huge. There are some dogs that, and like some people that are very willing to work with you and they're just innately able to want to work with you and do whatever you're bidding. Other dogs will be like, okay, what's in it for me? And you have to really make it worth their while, right? So that becomes a little bit of a challenge when you have a dog that's like, well, that's a little harder to train, or the dog is impatient. The dog isn't really uh, the dog isn't really interested in doing stuff with you. Just like some people are like, they'll be interested in doing one thing, but not other things, right? They're not interested in being your, um, they're not really interested in working with you. Um, yes, and breeders are usually the first to test. And I'm going to tell you, your dogs should be, you should probably wait. And I know some breeders would disagree, but I think there's a lot of developmental things that happen from 7 weeks to 8 weeks. So it's hard to select a puppy, especially those of your dog sport people, at before they're 8 weeks old, from a temperament standpoint. There's still a lot of pathways that are being built there. So if you get a dog that's too young, it gets a little challenging there.
Yep,
Joanne,
and
we can't see you anymore.
I know it's dark. I hold on. Maybe I'll be like a creepy floating head.
You are a creepy floating head.
It's getting to be Halloween time. So, no, I was gonna say, right, yeah, you should absolutely wait till 8 weeks. But if your breeder does it at 7 and you can't get one done at 8, 7's better than nothing, right? So
Yes.
don't forego an assessment just because it's a week too early. But yes, there are a lot of changes that can still be made. So things that are seen then can shift.
Right. That's what I mean. You might just knowing that even if they assess them at 7 weeks, what you think you're getting may not be exactly what you're getting. So just be aware of that, because there's certain changes that are still happening from 7 to 8 weeks that may be, so that might change what you think you have. So it's just important. You know what I mean? You know what, Deb makes a really good point. Deb says dog seems to learn tricks better than standard obedience. You know why? Because we make standard obedience more serious because they're obedience commands versus it's all tricks to the dog. Teaching the dog to do a high five and teaching a dog to sit stay is the same. It's the same. Yep. But we have made it so much more not as fun. Right? So we don't have fun teaching it either. And instead of making it a little bit more fun for the dog and for you. But yeah, I think, and I think you're right, Deb, you probably make tricks a lot more fun to learn than, all the boring stuff. But if you really look at it, it's all tricks to the dog. And I think there's a book that's called that. It is all tricks. The dog learning how to, again, give paw is the same as learning how to sit stay. In their minds, it's the same thing. Right? So let's see. And maybe there's less precision required with tricks. Yeah, sort of. Well, I don't know. There's a lot of precision with tricks. You have to, some of them, especially if you're going to teach them how to put a basket in a hoop, or, that requires a lot more, focus and attention for sure.
Yep, balance something on their face, or lots of stuff.
Oh, are you? This is a question. Is that if she's herding her 13-month-old Yorkie poo, if you don't walk her all the time? Well, if the walks are causing her anxiety, yeah, you might want to, excuse me, you might want to address that first. Why she's anxious on her walks. And breaking down, why do you think, is it the leash? Is it the collar? Is it the walk? What is causing the anxiety is really what the first thing you want to figure out. Yeah, and actually the attitude of the handler, Aaron, like said, the attitude of the handler, and I'll be honest, I'm gonna be straight up. I am an impatient trainer. Sometimes, and I'm better now that I'm a little older and I understand dogs a little better, but I'm an impatient trainer. I want them to hurry up and learn it, and they have taught me that they're gonna learn it when they're gonna learn it. So, and that's that. However, when I am having a bad day and I am not feeling my cheery best, I do not train my dogs. I don't, especially if I'm not in a good mood, I don't, because that erodes that relationship, and that, it's a problem. So it's okay that if you can't handle something, or you're not in the mood, or you're not whatever, you're just, don't train the dog. Just don't do it.
Well, yeah, or stop in the middle, right? I'm sure we've all been somewhere where you're like, oh my God, what is wrong with you, right? It's okay to put the cookies down and just be like, all right, that's enough of that. Like, let's just go do something else, right? And it's so much better than to frustrate both of you, right? And degrade the relationship that we're trying so hard to build, right? Because somebody gets frustrated, and I promise the dog will get just as frustrated with you when he doesn't understand something that you're trying to force.
Yeah. Yeah, Judy, I do the same thing. And sometimes it's like, you don't know you're having a bad day until you start training your dog, and you're like, okay, I need to not do that because I'm getting, and sometimes waiting another day is a good thing. It's the best thing, right? Because then you're like, okay, just gonna take a chill pill and do something else. So yeah, if the walk is doing, and that's what I mean. When you're asking your dog to do stuff, does it have to do the thing you're asking it to do? Does it have to? Like for me, certain things are have tos. You have to walk nicely on a leash, and you have to come when I call you. Those are two I have to have that. The rest of it, I'm okay. We'll get there when we get there. But those are the two things I work on the most. Yeah, Aaron, and it's true. It's when you get frustrated. It's really, and so now that Aaron kind of brings us into the dog sport realm. So those of you who do dog sports, whatever, whether it's agility, nose work, whatever, when the competition creeps in, we want to hurry up and get through it so that they can get to competition or whatever. And it's like, taking your time will get you there faster, for sure. Absolutely, for sure. And actually today, and I'm going to pick on Joanne a little bit. Today was a good example of that for Joanne, right? Their first start in nose work was rough with the red beast. It wasn't, it was a little effort. She spent a little time at NW2 and trying to get into trials and stuff. And now she took a step back, did some work, and then now today her last two NW3s, first and second, were placements. She got a first place today, and she got second place the last one. But she stopped and took a step back.
Yep.
Go ahead.
And I said about this dog when he was 2-ish, right? I'm like, we'll never be a placement team. As long as we can get it done, we'll be happy. But, he's just not a dog who will ever get placements. Well, we weren't then.
Yeah.
Right? We were not.
And how many, she spent some time at 2 trying to get through that. And yeah, there's some challenges that came up. She had to come up and work on those. But she took her time and she didn't rush it. And see, it's amazing what happens when you kind of, let's take a step back. Let's work on this. Let's figure out why this is happening. Noah was pretty sniffy, and he had some stuff going on, but now he's more solid. But she didn't rush it. Tango, stop it. She didn't rush it. She took her time, and she went back to see why those things were happening, why he was doing it. And then once that was sorted out, she's like, okay, now, and he goes, now we can go forward. And she handled him in a different way. Well, and one of the things is, and this goes back to attitude, Aaron, as you mentioned, Joanne would get upset with him when he would be doing the sniffy thing. So, well, and rightfully so, right? But then she started kind of changing things around and being more happy when he did do what she wanted. And incredibly, he was like, oh, you really like that, huh? And it was a total game changer for both of them. So it was really cool.
Yes, but pretty much all of the behaviors that I saw were created because I rushed things, right? I didn't have any dogs at the time, and I really liked nosework, and I really wanted to be back with my friends and, be at trials. And I pushed that dog way more than what I ever should have or what he was ready for. And you know what? It broke some stuff. And so it's like, nope, I want to have a good long life of playing this game with him. And so, yeah, I did have to go back but it's like, why was it broken? Because you broke it, right? I mean, it wasn't the dog. The dog got stressed, and that's how he showed his stress, because of me, because I put so much pressure on him in the beginning. So.
Right. So those of us who do dog sports, that's one of those things. I promise, going back a little bit and refining and retuning stuff is really, really helpful. And so, and if they don't understand it today, they will over time. Because, and I understand, believe me, I had a day of that today where I did not have such a great day. And I was feeling very, and granted, I have a lot of other stress that caused me to be more stressed about that, but more than I should have. But it was very much, Tango, stop it. Sorry, guys. It caused me to, think, okay, but now I do have stuff to work on every trial. What can I do better? Because we do have things to work on that I haven't, but because of my lifestyle, it's an issue, and I just need to remember that always. My lifestyle is causing certain things to be a thing, and I have to just deal with it for right now. Anyway. You never got, well, Judy, I got to tell you, I've had a lot of failures, let me tell you, in nosework where I didn't do well for a long time. I had some, but today was really, it was very upsetting, which I usually never get upset at trials. Like, I really don't until today. And I think it's just a combination of all the other stresses I have in my life that has caused it to be a bigger deal today than it probably should have. So, but it also was yeah, we're all normal. Cause I know I have some things I have to figure out, because this is not a good place to be for me. So it's like, and for my dogs too, right? They deserve better. So I have, there's some stuff I gotta think about. Right. And yeah, and the partners are very forgiving, and she was very forgiving of me today. Yeah, when you're those of you, when you're doing the dogs, whatever dog sport, your dog's going to get there. It's just not maybe, and you're not competing against anybody but yourself. You're going to get there as a team. And working on that will and it's okay if you have to go back a little bit to make it better and to tweak it. And I know the dog sport people, they want to hurry up and just get through it, which the truth is, at the end of the day, they're not going to be done, right? What temperament changes are seen between 7 and 8 weeks? Mostly, a lot of the changes we see, Deb, is sometimes in sociability. You might see a dog that's maybe super social at 7 weeks and maybe not as social, so that's not a big deal. The change is very minor. The other changes is that biddability, that cooperation part, right? You might see a little shift in that. You also might see a big shift in confidence too. So the dog
Yeah.
may seem very confident at 7 weeks, at 8 weeks, not so much, right? Luckily, confidence we can make better, but sometimes those, or sometimes if a dog that's maybe isn't so visual becomes a little more visual, depending on the breed that you're looking at. So that's why sometimes at 7 weeks the changes are, you know, they're slight, but they're there, and so then you think, oh, my dog's really confident, and then it's maybe not. Um, so that's why. So those are some of the small ones, and they're not big. Some of them can be big. Sociability being the more concerning, right? You want a dog that's social and is going to like people and other dogs. And at 7 weeks, it might look like he's likes that, and at 8, and not that he's going to be antisocial, but it may not be as friendly as you maybe wanted, right? So usually you can, ideally you want to try at 8 weeks if you can. And I understand, like Joanne said, if you can't get 8 weeks, then let's, do what you can. 7 weeks is better than nothing. At least you have a starting off point. So, because I've done as early as 7 and as late. Well, for puppies, we just do them whenever you get the dog. New pup, 8 weeks is good. 8 to 9 weeks. Because that's the other thing. That's a balance, right? You see people bringing home dogs way too late. 12 weeks, 14 weeks is too much time away. Too much time that you don't get a chance to work with your dog, right? How does a senior student learn how to play with the dog? I can't run, nor was able to teach returning a thrown ball, etc. Oh, well, there are ways you can play with the dog. So, for example, you don't have to teach a retrieve. You don't have to be able to throw a ball really far. You can just throw it pretty close. That's how I start all my puppies on a retrieve. Really quick and close, and then eventually you can throw it a little further. And you can play. There's games for all, right? You just have to figure out what's going to work for you and your dog, depending on the breed of your dog too, right?
Yeah, and depending upon your senior, right, you can teach a lot of tricks from a chair, right? You can teach them to step on a button. You can teach them to speak. You can teach them to back up, right? You can teach them to leave it. I mean, all those things are fun interactions that don't really require you to get out of the chair.
Right. And you can, so yeah, there's it depends on the dog. And also, sometimes with the seniors, like walkers and stuff, you got to make sure the dog's desensitized to that stuff too. So, so I wanted to kind of go over. Let's see if I can do that. So first thing, you want to have time and patience. And here's the thing for all our pet owning population: don't buy a dog for your children. You can buy it as a companion for your child, but don't buy a dog and expect the dogs to take responsibility.
Or your spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend.
Yes, especially those. Your kids aren't going anywhere. Those might, not last. But it's true. It's like you have to be, if you want the dog, you need to spend the time to train it and work with it. So understanding that training is a process. It's not going to be done in a short time. It takes time and effort. Like Lynn's analogy about losing weight. It takes a long time to put the weight on. It doesn't feel like it, but it takes a while. So it's going to take a while for you to get rid of it. And same with training your dog and getting them to be really solid on it. It takes time for them to learn it, just like it takes time for us to learn stuff, right? Would you talk a little bit about teaching a nice walk, not heel, no pulling, while also still needing to walk to a specific level? I feel like I'm undoing some of our progress as we have places to go. Yeah, Stephanie, that's a great, because we don't teach heel unless you're doing competitive obedience. We just teach loosely walking. So we use let's go. So when you are not able, so usually I usually use a food lure for healing. It works really well for me. Or if you're a clicker trainer, that works really well as well. And yeah, so one of the things is you have to have a plan. If you're not able to work on on not pulling, then you need to have a way to manage that, right? You need to have a way to manage them so they don't pull. So whether that's a training collar, cookie in front of the nose, or something where they can't practice pulling while you're trying to get from point A to point B. Unless you have time, you have to dedicate time to training. And let me tell you, my lovely, wonderful lab took me 2 years to teach her not to pull. I was like, and I'm a dog trainer. I do this for my shepherds. 6 months, they were great.
I'm on year 3 with the Doberman.
It takes time. So making sure you make the time to go from point A to point B training. So I usually use a lure. I reinforce when they're in the area I want, right? And you choose that. How far away can they be from you, right? You cannot drag me. You stop moving forward if they try to pull me. I don't allow it because I'm older. I can fall down, and I don't want to. And I have a 95-pound shepherd, so yeah, he doesn't get to pull me. So I just stop moving. So yeah, I would definitely. If it's a little dog, I would pick him up and let him practice. If it's a big dog, I would lure with a treat and get to where you need to go, right? And then manage it. So they're not learning, you're just managing, right? So that's really important. He's a Dane, right? So picking him up, no option. So use a way to manage him. So that might mean, Stephanie, using a head halter, a harness, or something like that, so that he's not practicing pulling. And then when you can train it, then you train it. So and it's okay to do that, you guys. Sometimes you have to go between management and training. You have to. There's just no other way to do that. No other way, especially walking on a leash, especially if you're trying to get through, like going to a dog show or whatever. You're going to manage it mostly because that environment's so stimulating. The dog can't possibly, going to walk perfectly on a leash, especially if it's a young dog.
Yep. So. And I'll tell you, I know this is probably true for you, Nancy, as well. I just have windows in my facility so I can see, right? You spend an hour training your dog how to walk really nice on a leash. And as soon as you walk out the door, I watch the dog drag you to your car, right? Like, what? So consistency is a big piece too, right? Like, yes, we're saying don't let the dog continue to pull you, but that means always. It doesn't mean just when you're deciding to work on leash training, right? Because if that 10% of your day spent on leash training, and then the rest of the time they're dragging you to the car because you're going to go to play ball, or they're dragging you back into the house, or they're dragging you down to, the mailbox, they're practicing it. So just think about how many times a day your dog gets to practice dragging you.
Right. So that's what I mean. You can't let them drag you. So you have to manage it the other way. And so what I did, Stephanie, with my lab, I put a freedom harness on her. So she doesn't, so when I could not, like sometimes when I'm getting to work, she goes to work with me because I have my own facility. I put that harness on her and I'd walk her into the building when she was younger because I wasn't going to let her pull me into the building because I didn't want her practicing that until I was there. And then on the days that I had more time in the morning to get the dog in, then yes, no problem. We would work on it and we would go in the building with, her walking nicely on a leash. But if I couldn't, if I was in a hurry and I was busy, yep, that harness went on and she didn't pull me. I didn't allow her to pull me in the building. So that's kind of how you kind of go between those two things, right? Yeah, people tend to overtrain their dogs a lot. It's almost like, and if you think, those of you who have children, if you think about it, if you're going to make your kid do homework for 2 hours, that's, I know sometimes they have to, but you can imagine how they, towards the end of that time, how they don't want to do that. And it depends on your dog. If you have a dog that's like, okay, yes, I'll work with it. But even if you can train a dog that'll just do everything for you, you still shouldn't do it. Because how unfun are you making training for your dog, right? And yeah, so and then because this is what happens, right? The dog does it really well one time, and instead of ending the training session, what do? Let's do that one more time. And then they fail, and then you end it on a failure instead of on a win. So it's, especially those, like I said, especially those people who tend to um, want to overtrain and just keep getting it right. Christy, that's a good point. Learning styles. That is such a good point, because people, like for me, I learned a lot about learning styles as I train people, because some people are more visual, some people are more they can read it. And as we're doing a lot of the online work, that's become very apparent. It's so fascinating because we provide written word and we provide video, and so that both type of learners can use it, and some use more than the others, right? You could tell the ones that don't use that don't read the instructions, they just watch the video. So they make us better at doing that part.
Yeah, I had one of those. I used this even though it said not to, because I didn't read it. I was like, well, thanks for being honest. Oh. But here's another really cool part, and not everyone has access to this, right? So Nancy and I were not certified, but we've spent many years learning Carrot, which is Suzanne Clothier's assessment tool. Changed our lives in being able to view dogs, and I will tell you, we can probably tell you what your dog's learning style is just with a 10-15 minute assessment of your dog.
Yeah, it's easier, and
right,
that's,
not everyone can do that, but you can if you have the ability to read dogs well enough and you understand learning styles, right? That's absolutely, you can tell.
right. So this was Barb. How do you motivate students to do training at home, not just train 1 hour of class in a week? Well, Barb, that's the question of the hour, right? How do you get them to train?
When you let us know, or when you figure it out, let us know.
Well, one thing I did in the past, I would say I would give them, and here's the thing, make it easy. Anything, and this goes back to, and those of you who are in my competitive edge class, you want to change a small habit. So one of the things you can give them to do is like, okay, let's teach your dog before he goes out the door at your house, make them sit. And then you can say, how many times did your dog do that during, keep track of it during the week, or 2 days out of the week. How many, that when you ask them to do that, how many times did they do it? So they're inadvertently training their dogs by incorporating into their lives, because that's the problem. Like Joanne said earlier, people come to your class and they're fine, healing, and they're perfect, and then they just let them drag them out the door. So one of the things you want to do, one of the valuable things about training is incorporating it into your life. And let me just tell you, I had my own aha moment. I was trying to put on a jacket, and I had my little, back then I had Bandit, my little Eskimo, and he's moving around, and I'm trying to put my jacket on, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. This dog knows how to stay. So I asked him to sit and stay so I could put my freaking jacket on. Use the training that we have. So those are some of the ways you can say, give them one thing, like say, okay, we're going to have your dog sit stay while you put your hand on the doorknob, right? And then you can let them out. So then they can start incorporating those things into their, and then you just ask on the next week, so, how many of you, how's that going, or whatever. It'll make and it's one thing. Most people can do the one thing. And that's how you change a habit or or get better, right? You do one thing at a time. So
yes, and to counter that though, right? To counter that, what I would say is, if they're really struggling with something and you see the way that they're doing it might not be going so well, there is an art of don't practice this unless you're with me, right? Don't practice this behavior unless we can be together to guide it and sculpt it. Because remember, many times if the dog does something wrong, that is creating the pattern. So if they spend an hour with you fixing what they've spent 40 hours a week creating, right? Sometimes it's not enough to break that chain. So, and I'll just go so far as to say it, when we do baby dog nose work and we intro to odor for the very first time, I asked how many people practice at home, and this particular week nobody raised their hand, and I said it's okay. Don't feel bad about that, because guess what? Every experience your dog has now finding that odor is going to be 100%. Right? We're going to guide you. We're going to make sure there's no mistakes. We're going to make sure you pay them quickly. We're going to make sure all of these things, right? So for beginning obedience, yes, of course, they need to incorporate that for the dogs to get better. But sometimes if you're dealing with something that's a little tougher behaviorally, sometimes it does help to not do
Right.
things on their own, right? So there's two sides to that.
Yep. But most of the pet stuff, yes, for sure. And
Yes.
Lori Divitt's learning style is visual, and yes, it coupled with I can do it myself. That's unfortunately what her learning style is. Yeah, Jill, you're right. We're both certified. You got that right. Yeah. So you want to figure out if they're more visual learners or whatever, because dogs have learning styles too, right? Remember you mentioned that from your last session, my little Jazz really does well with sitting and calming down before I open the door. Yeah. And that's what I mean. Those, and that's what I was wanting to tell Barb. It's like some of those things you can just tell if people can do one thing, and most people will do one thing, like, hey, can you just have them sit every time they go out the door? I bet you people just that one thing. And then people will be like, oh my God, he's doing so great. Or they can sit before they come out of the crate, or just something that they can incorporate into their everyday lives, and people then can start, because that's how you create new habits, right? You do one small thing at a time. And I think giving them ideas on how to incorporate it into their lives and making it a little contest, like how many, it's really helpful. That explains why she does. Well, Lori, you hit it on the head. So Lori was talking about learning styles. If you're a more visual learner, and that's people and dogs, you learn better by seeing, right? And taking that in. So your listening isn't as great, right? Versus people who can listen to you and not have to see it and just listen and be able to process it. So and you want to think about how you learn, because our dogs have learning styles as well, right? I'm definitely more of a visual learner for sure. I mean, you can learn all different ways, but my main focus, I am a more visual person. Versus some people are much better at listening. They're more auditory. Did you hear that sound or that sound? And I'm like, yeah, I heard it, but I didn't tune into it. Versus something visually, I will turn into it much quicker. So dogs learn the same way, right? Same with touch and some other things. So touch is one that it's a lot of it's not, how can I say, it's not mentioned as much, because sometimes a lot of us want to pet the dog, really pet the dog, and the dog's like, yeah, like too much. It's like petting somebody who doesn't like to be touched. It's like, don't touch me. And that conflicts with the training part. So Lori's a listener, and Divot and I are opposite ends. Yeah, love that. And I'm sure she listens too, but she's more visual dog for sure. So, and that's kind of how she takes in her world, where you listen more, right? And you can come to a pass. It just takes a little bit. Like you have to kind of go to her world a little bit and try to develop your more visual, a little more focus on what she's focused on, and use that to your training advantage, right? So for example, if you want your dog to come, some dogs, if you're like, oh, what's this? If you're looking at something else, they're gonna focus in on it, and they'll come, that way, because they're interested in that. Don't do that. Anyway, any other questions? So a couple of things I want you to come away with for your training. First of all, be patient with your training. You need to practice at home. Your results will directly impact what results you get with your dog, whether it's dog sports or a pet dog, will directly correspond with how much training you put in. If you put a lot of training in, you'll get more. If you get a little less training, you'll get less. And it's not good or bad. It's knowing that that's where you're at, right? So like I don't train my dogs a lot as much as I'd like to. So I know what I'm going to get, what I'm going to get. Versus if I put a lot of time in, you expect a little more. But whatever you put in, you'll get back. I promise you. Thanks, Aaron, for that. What dogs do after training affects how much. Yeah, Aaron, that article is really good. That from Psychology Today, it tells us that we should play with our dogs after training. They retain more of it, which is true. The other thing is, being patient. Also, you have to incorporate what you're learning, whether you're in class, whether it's an online class or an in-person class. And you have to also, and this sounds so cheesy and corny, but you have to kind of take it from the dog's perspective, right? What the dog is telling us. So you might think you're doing the right thing, or you might think that this is got to be a good way for them to learn. It's not. You might have to figure out another way. And you should work with a trainer that can give you other suggestions. If one thing doesn't work, what else can we do to make it work? And trying different things, and knowing that it's a process, that some dogs are going to learn certain things faster than others. Some skills are going to be better than others. Because what happens is sometimes it becomes you practice only what they're good at instead of trying to build what they're not good at. Like if they're good at giving paw, that's like how many pet dogs can shake paws like perfectly, because they practice that a lot. Right? So anyway, so those are the things I want you to get the most out of your training. Be patient. It takes time. Incorporate it into your life. And try to figure out, become a detective with your dog. Figure out how can you teach them these different things. It's kind of fun to figure out, like, okay, that didn't work. What will work? But always spoiling the dog a bad thing? No, my dogs are very spoiled. Have you met Joanne's dogs? Come on. They're all spoiled. No, not a bad thing at all. Not a bad thing at all. My dogs are very spoiled, for sure. My dogs are spoiled, but they understand when I ask them to do something, I really mean it. And that's the other thing. When you're training, make sure you can back it up. Don't give your dog or ask your dog to do something and not back it up. My husband is notorious for that. He will tell him something and then he won't back it up. So the dogs are like, we don't have to listen. And they don't. So. No, Judy, he was here earlier. He fell asleep before we got started. So she said that the cat didn't make an appearance. He did early on in the beginning. All right, all. Hope this was helpful. And we'll see you all next time.
Hopefully not Halloween episode.
Yeah, exactly. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.